Stella opens her door to badges and a man who calmly claims her protection. Stella's fingers trembled as she threaded the needle through the final suture on Mr. Abernathy's arm. 16 hours into what should have been a 12-hour shift, and the ER still pulsed with the chaos of a Friday night. Blood, antiseptic, and desperation hung in the air like a fog that never quite lifted. "There you go," she said, her voice gentle despite the exhaustion weighing on her bones. "Keep it clean. Change the bandage twice daily and no more breaking up bar fights, okay?" The old man chuckled, his weathered face creasing into familiar lines. "No promises, Doc." "Nurse," she corrected automatically, though she'd given up the fight years ago. To the regulars who cycled through Chicago Memorial's ER, anyone in scrubs who helped them was Doc. By the time Stella finally pushed through the staff entrance into the parking lot, the city had transformed into that peculiar limbo between midnight and morning. The November air bit through her thin jacket, and she hugged herself as she trudged toward her rusted Honda Civic. 3 blocks from the hospital, her apartment waited. Small, nothing special, but hers. Safe. The elevator in her building was out again. Stella dragged herself up 4 flights of stairs, each step a negotiation with her exhausted body. The hallway light flickered, throwing eerie shadows across the worn carpet. All she wanted was a hot shower, maybe a glass of wine, and the blessed oblivion of sleep without dreams. The pounding on her door jolted her awake at 11:47 p.m. the next day. Stella had collapsed into bed after her shift and slept through most of Saturday, her body demanding recompense for weeks of overtime and double shifts. The knocking came again, harder this time, authoritative. "Coming!" she called, her voice hoarse with sleep as she wrapped herself in a robe and stumbled to the door. Through the peephole, she saw 2 men in suits, their faces set in the grim mask she recognized from her job, the look of people delivering bad news. Her heart stuttered. There was only one person they could be here about. "Jamie," she whispered, her brother's name a prayer and a curse on her lips. She opened the door to the width of the security chain. "Can I help you?" "Stella Carter?" The taller of the 2 men held up a badge. "Detective Wilson, Chicago PD. This is Detective Ramirez. We need to ask you some questions." "About what?" Her mouth had gone dry, tongue sticking to the roof of her mouth. "It would be better if we discussed this inside, Miss Carter." Stella hesitated, training and instinct warring with each other. "Check the badge. Call the precinct to verify. Don't let strangers into your home." But if Jamie was in trouble again... "Let me see your badges again, please," she said, her nurse's training winning out. The men exchanged glances before holding up their credentials. They looked legitimate, but as Stella reached to close the door to remove the chain, a shadow moved behind them. A third figure stepped into view, taller than both detectives, broader through the shoulders. He wore a black overcoat that probably cost more than 3 months of Stella's rent, and beneath it, a suit cut to accommodate the obvious strength of his frame. But it was his face that made Stella's breath catch. Olive skin, features that belonged on an Italian Renaissance painting, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Dangerous eyes, beautiful but lethal. The detectives tensed as the man stepped forward, his movement fluid despite his size. "She's with me," he said, his voice a low rumble that carried an accent. Italian, but smoothed by American education. Expensive education. "There's been a misunderstanding." Detective Wilson's hand drifted toward his weapon. "Mr. Ricci, we were told." "You were told wrong." The man, Ricci, cut him off without raising his voice. The effect was more intimidating than if he'd shouted. "Ms. Carter is under my protection. Whatever concerns you have can be addressed through my attorney tomorrow." Stella stood frozen, confusion and fear battling for dominance. She'd never seen this man before in her life. "Ms. Carter?" Detective Ramirez looked at her, his expression carefully neutral. "Is that true? Are you acquainted with Mr. Ricci?" Before she could deny it, Ricci's eyes locked with hers. There was a warning there, clear as spoken words. "Play along, or there will be consequences." Yes, she managed, the lie sticking in her throat. I know him." The detectives exchanged looks, heavy with meaning. "We'll be in touch," Wilson finally said, but his gaze lingered on Stella with something like concern. "If you need to contact us for any reason." He slipped a card through the gap in the door. Stella took it with numb fingers. As the detectives retreated down the hallway, Ricci remained, his eyes never leaving Stella's face. When they were out of earshot, he spoke again. "We need to talk, inside." "I don't know who you are," Stella hissed, moving to slam the door. But his hand shot out, not to force the door open, but to brace against it, not pushing, just holding firm. "Your brother Jamie owes my organization $200,000, Ms. Carter. The men who are looking for him won't be as civilized as those detectives. Or me." Stella felt the blood drain from her face. Jamie had been clean for 18 months. He had a job at a tech startup, was finally getting his life together. This couldn't be happening again. "You're lying," she whispered. "I wish I was." And strangely, he sounded sincere. "The Blackwood organization doesn't share my professional ethics when it comes to collecting debts. They'll use you to get to him. Now, please, let me come in before someone sees us having this conversation in your hallway." Stella's mind raced through options, finding none that ended well. If he wanted to hurt her, he could. Have let the detectives leave, then forced his way in. If he was telling the truth about Jamie... She closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it again. Luca Ricci stepped inside her apartment, bringing with him the scent of expensive cologne and barely leashed danger. He filled the small space, making her furniture look shabby and her life small. His eyes catalogued everything: the medical textbooks stacked on her coffee table, the single-framed photo of her and Jamie from better days, the scrubs hanging to dry in the bathroom doorway. "You're a nurse," he said, not a question. "ER," she replied automatically, then shook her head. "No, wait, I don't need to tell you anything. Who are you?" "Really?" He unbuttoned his overcoat but didn't remove it. "Luca Ricci. I run certain business interests in Chicago. Your brother borrowed money from associates of mine to fund a venture. The venture failed, and now the debt has been sold to a rival organization that's less patient than I am." Jamie wouldn't, but even as she said it, doubt crept in. Jamie had been an addict for years before getting clean. He'd stolen from her before, disappeared for months at a time. He'd sworn he was different now, but he would and he did, Luca said, not unkindly. "The question is what we do about it now." "We don't do anything. I'll call my brother and sort this out." "Your brother has disappeared. His apartment's been empty for days, his phone disconnected. The Blackwood organization has people watching your workplace, and as of this morning, this building." Stella sank onto her couch, legs suddenly unable to support her. "Why would the police be looking for him?" "Because the money was taken from one of my legitimate businesses. On paper, it looks like embezzlement, which is why those detectives are involved. But this stopped being about the police the moment Blackwood bought the debt. What do they want with Jamie? They want to make an example of him, and they'll use you to draw him out." Luca moved to her window, peering through the blinds. "That's why I'm here, to offer you protection." Stella's laugh was bitter. "Protection? From what I've heard about men like you, that's just another word for control." Luca turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Normally you'd be right, but in this case, it's a mutual arrangement. You stay safe, which keeps Jamie from doing something stupid, and I get to handle the Blackwood situation without civilian casualties complicating matters." "And what exactly does this protection involve?" "For starters, making it known that you're under my personal protection, which is what I just did with those detectives. It also means security measures here, someone watching you at work, and a cover story to explain my presence in your life." The implication hit her like a slap. "You want people to think we're together, romantically?" "It's the simplest explanation, one that both the authorities and my enemies will understand." Stella pushed herself to her feet, anger finally burning through the fear. "You can't just walk into someone's life and rearrange it to suit your purposes. I have patients who depend on me, friends who will ask questions. And you have a brother who will end up dead in the river if we don't find him before Blackwood does." Luca's voice remained level, but something in his eyes softened. 1 week, Ms. Carter. Give me 1 week to find Jamie and resolve this. Then you can return to your life as if we never met." Stella wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the apartment's warmth. 1 week to save Jamie. 1 week pretending to be the girlfriend of a man who radiated danger like heat. And if I say no? Then I walk out that door and you take your chances with Blackwood's men. They're not known for their gentle touch, especially with women, a choice that was no choice at all. 1 week, she said finally, and you find Jamie. I'll find him. Luca pulled out his phone and sent a text. Within minutes, there was a knock at the door. 2 men in suits nodded respectfully to Luca before entering with cases of equipment. Security system, Luca explained as they began working efficiently around the apartment. Cameras outside, motion sensors, panic button that connects directly to my security team. Stella watched her sanctuary being transformed into a fortress, understanding settling cold in her stomach. Her life was no longer her own. For 1 week, she belonged to Luca Ricci and whatever dangerous game he was playing. As if reading her thoughts, Luca stepped closer. This isn't a prison, Stella. It's a shield. The use of her first name sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Doesn't feel that way from where I'm standing. Perspective is everything. His eyes held hers, and for a moment, something passed between them, not quite understanding, but recognition. 2 people caught in circumstances beyond their control, making the best of terrible options. The moment broke when one of his men approached with a question about camera placement. Stella retreated to her tiny kitchen, bracing her hands against the counter and taking deep breaths. 1 week. She could survive anything for 1 week. What she didn't know yet was whether she'd survive Luca Ricci. Stella yanked her scrub top over her head, already 5 minutes late for her shift. 3 days since Luca Ricci had walked into her life, and she'd barely slept. Every noise startled her awake. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. The security team had finished installing the system, leaving her apartment feeling like someone else's space. Worse was the constant awareness of being watched. Luca had been clear. She was never alone now. Either his people were physically present or monitoring the cameras. For her protection, he claimed. It felt like a cage. She grabbed her bag and opened her apartment door, then jumped back with a strangled yelp. A woman leaned against the wall opposite, arms crossed over a leather jacket that hugged her athletic frame. Dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail emphasized sharp cheekbones and eyes that matched Luca's in both color and intensity. Jesus Christ! Stella pressed a hand to her racing heart. Who are you? Sophia Ricci. The woman straightened, unconcerned by Stella's reaction. Luca sent me to accompany you to work. Ricci? You're his sister. Sophia's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. Disappointed? Most women are when they find out Luca has a sister instead of a wife, Stella bristled. I'm not most women, and I'm not interested in your brother's marital status. I'm just trying to get to my job without a heart attack. Sophia's appraising look held a new respect. Good. Whining women bore me. She gestured to the elevator. After you. Stella's Civic sat in its usual spot, but Sophia shook her head. We're taking my car. I need my car for after work. I'll be driving you home too. Stella's temper flared. Look, I agreed to the security system and the protection, but I draw the line at being chauffeured around like a child. Sophia's expression hardened. 2 of Blackwood's men were parked outside your building last night. Another followed you from the hospital the day before. This isn't a game, Stella. My brother doesn't extend his personal protection to just anyone, which means if something happens to you on my watch, my life won't be worth living. So you'll take my car, or I'll call Luca and let you explain to him why you're being difficult. The threat hung between them. Stella thought of Jamie, of what might happen if she refused. Fine, she muttered, following Sophia to a sleek black Audi. The hospital parking lot was crowded when they arrived, Sophia scanning constantly as she guided Stella inside. At the staff entrance, Stella paused. You can't come in. Hospital policy, no unauthorized personnel in treatment areas. Sophia raised an eyebrow. I'm your cousin, visiting from out of town. I'm feeling unwell and want to stay close to a medical professional. That's not going to, or I'm your new girlfriend and we're in that can't bear to be apart phase. Your choice. Stella felt heat rise to her cheeks. Cousin, she ground out, but you stay in the waiting area unless I call you. Sophia's smile was all teeth. Whatever you say, Kugina. The shift passed in a blur of patience, each one pulling Stella into the focused state that made her an excellent nurse. For hours, she could forget about Jamie, about Luca, about the danger lurking just beyond her awareness. Here, with her hands moving efficiently between patients, she was herself again. Until her lunch break, when she found Sophia sitting in the hospital cafeteria, a cup of untouched coffee in front of her. "Thought cousin stayed in the waiting room," Stella said, setting down her tray. "Changed my mind." Sophia's eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging every entrance and exit. "Too many blind spots up there?" Stella followed her gaze, suddenly seeing the cafeteria through different eyes, the multiple entrances, the crowd that could conceal threats, the limited escape routes. "Is it always like this for you?" she asked quietly. "Seeing danger everywhere?" Something flickered across Sophia's face. "You get used to it." "That's not what I asked." Sophia met her eyes, and for a moment the tough exterior cracked. "Yes, it's always like this. In our world, letting your guard down gets you killed." Stella pushed her sandwich around the plate, appetite gone. "How did Luca get involved in whatever this is? Family business? Our father ran it before him." "And you?" Sophia's mouth twisted. "Not all glass ceilings are in legitimate businesses, Stella. I handle security in certain specialized tasks." The euphemism hung between them, its implications clear. Stella should have been repulsed, but instead found herself curious. "But you're his sister. Doesn't that count for something?" "It counts for everything," Sophia said simply. "Luca pulled me out of a foster home when he was barely 18. Our father had died, our mother was gone, and the family business was in chaos. He rebuilt everything from nothing, made sure I finished school, kept me safe when everyone wanted us dead." Her eyes hardened. "So yes, I handled the specialized tasks. Gladly." The loyalty in her voice was absolute. Stella wondered what it would be like to inspire that kind of devotion, or to feel it. Her pager beeped, ending the conversation. "Emergency in the ER. I have to go." Sophia nodded, rising with her. "I'll be close." The rest of the shift passed without incident, though Stella felt Sophia's presence like a shadow, always nearby, always watching. By the time they returned to her apartment, exhaustion dragged at her limbs. "Will you be standing guard all night too?" she asked as she unlocked her door. "No, night team takes over in—" Sophia froze, her hand sliding beneath her jacket to what Stella suddenly realized must be a gun. "What is it?" Stella whispered. "Door's been tampered with. Lock is scratched." Sophia pushed Stella behind her. "Stay here." Before Stella could protest, Sophia had drawn her weapon and slipped inside the apartment, moving with lethal grace. Heart pounding, Stella pressed herself against the hallway wall, every worst-case scenario flooding her mind. Minutes later, Sophia reappeared. "All clear. But someone was here. They're good. Bypassed the security system somehow." Stella followed her inside, looking around her apartment with new eyes. Nothing seemed disturbed, but the feeling of violation was overwhelming. How did they get past the security? "Only a few people could manage it." Sophia was already on her phone. "Yes, we need a full sweep, possible compromise." She listened, then nodded. "Bringing her there now." "Bringing me where?" Stella demanded as Sophia ended the call. "Luca's house. It's not safe here. Anymore." "I'm not leaving my apartment." "You don't have a choice." Sophia was already gathering Stella's essentials, methodically opening drawers. "Pack enough for a few days. We leave in 5 minutes." "This wasn't the agreement," Stella protested, but even to her own ears it sounded weak. The image of someone in her apartment, touching her things, possibly waiting for her, made her skin crawl. "The agreement was to keep you safe," Sophia countered, tossing Stella's work bag to her. "That's no longer possible here." 30 minutes later, Stella sat in the back of a different car, a black SUV with tinted windows, watching the city give way to the wealthy northern suburbs. Sophia hadn't spoken since they left the apartment, her tension filling the vehicle like a physical presence. They turned through imposing iron gates that opened automatically, then proceeded up a long driveway flanked by perfectly maintained gardens. The house that came into view made Stella's jaw drop. Mansion was too modest a word. The sprawling estate looked like something from a magazine, all limestone and columns and windows that glowed golden in the evening light. "This is where Luca lives?" she asked, unable to keep the awe from her voice. Sophia glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "One of his properties." The car stopped at the front entrance, where Luca himself stood waiting, his powerful frame silhouetted against the light spilling from inside. As Stella stepped from the car, she noticed his expression, not the controlled mask she'd seen before, but tight with genuine concern. "Are you hurt?" he he asked, his eyes scanning her as if looking for injuries. The question caught her off guard. No, I'm fine. Someone bypassed our security, Sophia reported, her voice clipped. Professional job, no signs of search, just entry. A warning, Luca said, his jaw tightening. Blackwood letting us know he can reach her. Or checking to see if we'd notice, Sophia added. Luca nodded to his sister, some unspoken communication passing between them. Get the team together. I want to know how they did it and who they have on the inside. As Sophia departed, Luca turned his attention back to Stella. I'm sorry about this. The intrusion in your home, bringing you here. It wasn't part of the plan. Stella was too tired for anger. None of this was part of my plan, Mr. Ricci. Luca, he corrected gently, if you're staying in my home, we should be on a first-name basis. Is that what's happening? I'm staying here now? Just until we find Jamie and resolve this situation. He led her inside, through a foyer bigger than her entire apartment, into a house that spoke of old money and power. It's the safest place for you. An older woman appeared, her kind face at odds with the tension in the air. Mr. Ricci, the blue room is prepared for Ms. Carter. Thank you, Maria. Luca nodded. Could you show Stella to her room? I'm sure she'd like to rest before dinner. Maria's warm smile included Stella. Of course. This way, dear. As Stella followed the housekeeper up a sweeping staircase, she glanced back to see Luca watching her, his expression unreadable. In the golden light of the foyer, surrounded by the trappings of his power, he looked like exactly what he was, dangerous, commanding, a man accustomed to control. Yet he had asked if she was hurt, had apologized for the disruption to her life. Small things, perhaps, but unexpected from someone like him. The blue room turned out to be a suite larger than her entire apartment, decorated in shades of sapphire and silver. A massive four-poster bed dominated one side, while a sitting area with a fireplace occupied the other. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking manicured gardens. Bathroom through there, Maria indicated a door. Closet beside it. Mr. Ricci had some clothes brought for you. I hope the sizes are right. Stella opened the closet to find it filled with designer clothes, price tags still attached, casual wear, work clothes, even a few evening dresses. The presumption should have angered her, but exhaustion had dulled her emotional responses. Dinner is at 7, Maria continued, but I can have something brought up if you prefer to rest. I'll come down, Stella said, surprising herself. Thank you, Maria. Left alone, Stella sank onto the edge of the bed, its softness enveloping her. The luxury surrounding her was so far removed from her normal life that it felt like a dream, or a particularly elaborate cage. Her phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. I heard you've moved up in the world, Em. From the hospital to the mob boss's mansion. Quite a promotion. J. Jamie. Her fingers fumbled as she typed back. Where are you? Are you safe? The response came immediately. Safer than you. Get out of there, Em. Ricci isn't what you think. Before she could respond, another text. Can't talk now. We'll contact soon. Don't trust anyone. The message disappeared from her screen as she watched, the entire conversation vanishing as if it had never happened. Stella stared at her phone, a chill running through her. Jamie was alive. He knew where she was, and he wanted her away from Luca Ricci. In the mansion of a man she barely knew, surrounded by luxury that felt like quicksand, Stella had never felt more trapped, or more confused. Because despite Jamie's warning, despite everything she knew about men like Luca Ricci, a part of her didn't want to leave, and that scared her more than anything else. The morning sun spilled through the French doors of Stella's suite, casting patterns across a bed she'd barely slept in. 4 days since she'd moved into Luca's mansion, 4 days of luxury that felt like borrowed time. She stared at her phone, willing it to light up with another message from Jamie, but it remained stubbornly dark. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Come in, she called, expecting Maria with breakfast. Instead, Luca entered, already dressed in a charcoal suit that fit his powerful frame with bespoke precision. In the morning light, she noticed details she'd missed before, a small scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the slight flecks of amber in his otherwise dark eyes, the way he moved with contained energy, like a predator who had learned to walk among prey. "I thought we might visit your brother's apartment today," he said without preamble. Stella tensed. "You know where he lives?" "Of course." A faint smile touched his lips. "I've known since before I came to your door." "Then why haven't you gone there already?" "Because I needed you with me. Jamie's clever. He'll have hidden things where only you would think to look." Luca approached the window, looking out over his grounds. "If we're going to find him before Blackwood does, we need every advantage." Stella studied him, trying to read the truth in his profile. "Why do I get the feeling you're not telling me everything?" He turned to face her, expression carefully neutral. "Because I'm not. Just as you're not telling me about Jamie's text messages." Her heart stuttered. "How did you— Your phone is monitored, Stella, part of the protection package you agreed to." Anger flared hot and sudden. "You had no right." "I had every right," he countered, voice remaining infuriatingly calm. "My family's safety depends on knowing who contacts you and why." "But," he raised a hand to forestall her protest, "if it helps, I don't know what Jamie said. The system only flags that contact occurred. The messages disappeared before they could be captured." Stella wrapped her arms around herself, feeling violated all over again. "Is there any part of my life you don't control?" Something flickered across Luca's face, regret perhaps, or frustration. "This isn't about control. It's about keeping you alive while we sort out this mess." He moved toward the door. "Be ready in 20 minutes if you want to come. Sophia will drive us." 30 minutes later, Stella sat in the back of another sleek black vehicle, watching the city scroll past. They traveled in silence, Sophia at the wheel, Luca beside Stella, but maintaining careful distance. The tension between them stretched taut as piano wire. Jamie's apartment building was in Wicker Park, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and steel beams, exactly the kind of authentic urban living that tech workers loved. As they rode the freight elevator to the 3rd floor, Stella tried to imagine her brother here, living a life she apparently knew nothing about. "Wait," Sophia said as they reached his door. She drew her weapon, nodding to Luca, who positioned himself in front of Stella. The door was unlocked. Sophia entered first, moving with the same lethal efficiency Stella had witnessed before. After a tense moment, she called, "Clear, but someone's been here." The apartment was a study in controlled chaos, furniture overturned, papers scattered, but with a methodical purpose rather than random destruction. Someone had been searching, and thoroughly. "Blackwood's people," Lucas said, surveying the damage, "looking for the same thing we are." "Which is what exactly?" Stella asked, picking her way through the wreckage. The place barely looked like Jamie, too stylish, too expensive for the brother who'd struggled with addiction for years. "Money?" "Information," Luca replied. "Your brother's been gathering it for months." Stella moved to a bookshelf that had been emptied, books tossed aside. Among them, a battered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird caught her eye. She picked it up, something tugging at her memory. "We used to read this together," she murmured, "when we were kids after our parents died. It was our escape." She opened the book, flipping through pages yellow with age. Something fell out, a key, small and unmarked. "What's that?" Sophia asked sharply. "I don't know." But even as Stella said it, she remembered. "Wait. There's a storage facility near our old neighborhood. Jamie rented a unit there years ago to store the few things we kept from our parents' house." Luca took the key, examining it. "Storage unit number?" 223, Stella said without hesitation. "Some things you never forgot. The number of the hospital room where your parents died, the date of your brother's first overdose, the storage unit holding the last remnants of your former life." Luca nodded to Sophia, who was already texting. "We'll go there next, but first I want you to look around. See if there's anything else only you would recognize." Stella moved through the apartment, seeing glimpses of her brother beneath the stranger he'd become. A chipped mug she'd given him for Christmas years ago. A framed photo of them as teenagers, arms around each other, squinting into the sun. And in his bedroom, taped inside his closet door where it would be private, a 5-year sobriety chip. He'd only been clean for 18 months the last time they spoke. "He lied to me," she whispered, fingers tracing the metal token. "He's been clean longer than he told me." "People lie for many reasons," Luca said from the doorway. "Not all of them malicious." "Is that what you tell yourself?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Instead of anger, she saw resignation cross his features. Every day. Before she could respond, a laptop caught her eye, partially hidden beneath the bed. She pulled it out, an expensive MacBook Pro, password protected. "Try your birth date," Luca suggested. Stella typed in the numbers. Nothing. "Your parents' death date?" Again, no success. The day he got sober, Stella realized suddenly, entering a date 3 years earlier than what Jamie had told her. The screen unlocked. Files upon files appeared, organized with meticulous care. Photographs of men Stella didn't recognize, surveillance footage, financial records, and 2 folders labeled simply Ricci and Blackwood. Her finger hovered over the Ricci folder, hesitating. "Open it," Luca said quietly. "Whatever's there, we need to know." Inside were documents dating back decades, newspaper clippings about Luca's father, Antonio Ricci, business records, police reports. Stella scrolled through, stomach knotting with each new revelation of violence and corruption. "Your father was a monster," she said softly. "Yes." No defense, no justification, just acknowledgement. A subfolder caught her eye, labeled Carter, her family name. The file opened to reveal a newspaper article from 22 years ago. Chicago doctor and wife killed in home invasion. A photo showed her parents, her father in his white coat, her mother smiling beside him. Stella remembered the night perfectly. She was 8, Jamie 12, staying with neighbors while their parents attended a charity function. They never came home. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would Jamie have this?" Luca's expression had gone very still. "Keep reading." The next document was a police report, heavily redacted, but with one name that stood out clearly. Antonio Ricci, person of interest. "Your father," Stella breathed, the room suddenly too small, too hot. "Your father killed my parents?" "It's more complicated than that," Luca began, but Stella was already on her feet, backing away from him. "Complicated? They were murdered. The police told us it was a robbery gone wrong. That's why Jamie and I went into foster care. That's why—" her voice broke. "That's why everything fell apart." "Stella, I didn't know." Luca reached for her, but she flinched away. "I was 16 when it happened. My father never told me why, but I swear to you, if I'd known—" "What?" she demanded, tears streaming now. "What would you have done? Stopped being his son? Stopped taking his money, his power?" Before he could answer, Sophia burst in. "We need to move, now. Someone tripped the perimeter alarm I set." Luca's demeanor changed instantly, the personal conversation forgotten as he shifted into command mode. "Take the laptop, get Stella to the car." "Wait," Stella protested, but Sophia was already pulling her toward the door. "No time," Sophia hissed, weapon drawn. They made it to the hallway before the first shot rang out. Sophia shoved Stella against the wall, shielding her with her body as she returned fire. Stella caught glimpses of men in dark clothing at the far end of the corridor, heard Luca behind them engaging from Jamie's doorway. "Fire escape," Sophia ordered, pushing Stella toward a window. "Move." Stella crawled through onto the rusting metal structure, heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the gunfire behind her. Sophia followed, turning to provide covering fire as Luca backed toward them. A man appeared at the end of the hallway, taller than the others with a shock of white blonde hair. He raised his weapon with deliberate calm, and Sophia spun to push Stella down the metal stairs. The shot cracked through the air. Sophia jerked, a wet gasp escaping her lips as crimson bloomed across her shoulder. "Sophia!" Stella caught her as she stumbled, nurse's instincts overriding fear. Blood pulsed between her fingers as she pressed against the wound, warm and slick. Luca appeared beside them, firing back toward the window as he half-carried, half-dragged his sister down the fire escape. Stella kept pressure on the wound, mind racing through triage procedures even as bullets pinged against metal around them. They reached the street, Sophia's weight growing heavier as she lost blood. "Car," Luca barked, scanning the street. Their vehicle sat half a block away, too exposed. "She needs pressure and elevation," Stella said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The bleeding's bad, but not arterial. If we can get somewhere safe—" A black SUV screeched to a halt beside them, window rolling down to reveal one of Luca's men. "Boss, get in!" Luca lifted Sophia into the vehicle, Stella climbing in after them, still keeping pressure on the wound. As the SUV peeled away, Stella tore Sophia's shirt open to better assess the damage. "Through and through," she reported, relief washing through her. Missed the major vessels. Sophia, can you hear me? Sophia's eyes were glazed with pain, but she nodded. Had worse, she managed, though her complexion had gone ashy. First aid kit under the seat, the driver called back. Stella grabbed it, finding gauze and pressure bandages. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, packing the wound and securing the bandage. Hospital? The driver asked. No, Luca and Sophia said in unison. Too many questions, Luca added. Take us to the estate. Call Dr. Henson. Stella looked up at him, suddenly aware of the blood coating her hands and clothes, Sophia's blood, spilled protecting her. Who was that man? The one who shot her? Luca's face was a mask of controlled fury. Alexander Blackwood, and he just made this very, very personal. Stella should have felt terrified, sitting in a car with bloodied criminals fleeing a shootout. Instead, all she felt was the weight of revelation, her parents' murder, Jamie's secrets, Sophia's sacrifice, and beneath it all, the growing certainty that whatever game was being played, she was a pawn who'd just become a queen on the board. As the city blurred past, Stella looked at Luca, this man whose father had destroyed her childhood, who now held her future in his hands. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw something unexpected, shame, regret, and a question he couldn't voice. Could she ever forgive what his family had done to hers? She didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as she held pressure on his sister's wound, Stella realized that whatever happened next, there would be no going back to the life she'd known before. Sophia's blood had dried beneath Stella's fingernails, rusty crescents she couldn't seem to scrub away no matter how hard she tried. The bathroom in Luca's estate was larger than her entire hospital break room, all marble and gold fixtures, but the luxury felt obscene as she remembered Sophia's pale face, the way her breathing had grown shallow during the frantic drive. Dr. Henson, a silver-haired man with military posture and a medical bag that looked like it belonged in a combat zone, had arrived within minutes of their return. Stella had assisted with the surgery, her ER training proving invaluable as they extracted fragments of the bullet and repaired damaged tissue on Luca's dining room table, converted to a makeshift operating theater. Now, showered and dressed in clothes that weren't hers, Stella stood at the window of a different suite, closer to Luca's own rooms, she'd noticed, as if he wanted to keep her nearer. The estate grounds stretched before her, immaculate gardens giving way to a private lake that caught the sunset's glow. Beautiful, tranquil, and utterly foreign to the violence of the morning. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find an unfamiliar man, older, with a trimmed salt and pepper beard and eyes that seemed to calculate her worth with every blink. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice carrying the faintest trace of an accent she couldn't place. "I'm Marco Beneventi, Luca's consigliere. May I come in?" Stella stepped aside, recognizing the title from movies she'd seen. Advisor, right-hand man, the one who whispered in the boss's ear. Marco entered, his movements precise and controlled. He carried himself like a professor, but Stella didn't miss the slight bulge beneath his tailored jacket. Even the accountants carried guns in this world. "How is Sophia?" she asked. "Stable. Thanks in no small part to your assistance." He studied her, head tilted slightly. "Curious, isn't it? How fate places us exactly where we need to be, when we need to be there. I don't believe in fate, Mr. Beneventi." "No?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then how do you explain a skilled trauma nurse being present just when the daughter of the house takes a bullet?" Stella bristled. "If you're implying I had something to do with Sophia being shot," he raised a hand. "Not at all. Merely observing the convenience of certain arrangements." His gaze sharpened. "Like your brother's apparent connections to both the Ricci and Blackwood organizations, like the files conveniently discovered in his apartment, like your sudden importance to Luca, who has never before allowed personal feelings to interfere with business." The accusation hung in the air between them. "I'm not playing any game," Stella said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm a nurse who got dragged into something I don't understand because my brother made terrible choices. Sophia got shot protecting me, and I helped save her because that's my job. That's all." Marco studied her for a long moment. "For your sake, I hope that's true." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Luca has requested your presence for dinner. 7 o'clock in the small dining room. Sophia is, Asking for you as well, when you have a moment. After he left, Stella sank onto the edge of the bed, legs suddenly weak. The conversation had felt like dodging landmines blindfolded. Every person in this house was watching her, judging her loyalties, questioning her motives. Except, perhaps, Sophia. She found the youngest Ricci in a suite that mirrored her own, propped up on pillows with an IV stand beside the bed. Despite her pallor, Sophia's eyes were clear and alert. "There she is," Sophia said as Stella entered. "My personal Florence Nightingale." Stella approached the bed, automatically checking the IV line and the bandage visible beneath Sophia's silk pajamas. "How's the pain?" "Manageable. Henson's got me on the good stuff." Sophia shifted, wincing slightly. "Luca says you found something in Jamie's apartment, something about your parents." Stella's stomach clenched. Did everyone in this house know except me that Antonio Ricci killed my parents? Sophia's expression sobered. "No. I didn't know until today, neither did Luca." "How can you be sure?" "Because I know my brother." Sophia's voice was soft but certain. "Our father, he kept things from us, especially the worst things. Luca was groomed to take over, but he wasn't privy to everything until after our father died." Stella sank into the chair beside the bed. "Why would your father kill my parents? They were just a doctor and a teacher." Sophia shook her head. "I don't know. But I'm guessing Jamie does. That's why he's been gathering information, isn't it? To find out the truth." Before Stella could respond, a noise from the doorway made them both look up. Luca stood there, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. "Sophia needs rest," he said quietly. "Doctor's orders." Sophia rolled her eyes. "I've been shot before, Luca. I'm not dying." Nevertheless, his tone brooked no argument. Stella squeezed Sophia's hand before leaving, feeling the younger woman's fingers curl around hers in silent solidarity. Whatever else was happening, Sophia had taken a bullet for her. That counted for something. Dinner was a hushed affair in a room Luca called the small dining room, though it could easily seat 12. They ate at one end of a gleaming mahogany table, attended by a silent staff member who appeared and disappeared like a ghost. The food was exquisite, some kind of seafood pasta that would have been delicious if Stella could taste anything through her anxiety. "We need to talk about what we found," she finally said, setting down her fork. Luca nodded, signaling the attendant to leave. When they were alone, he pushed his own plate aside. "I've spent the afternoon making inquiries about your parents," he said, discreetly. And I've discovered that my father had business dealings with yours. Not criminal," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Your father was a respected neurologist, yes?" Stella nodded. "He specialized in traumatic brain injuries. According to my sources, he treated my grandfather after a stroke, saved his life, in fact. The families became connected." "Connected enough that your father murdered mine?" Luca's jaw tightened. "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "Stella, I understand your distrust, but I'm not my father. Whatever he did, whatever debt my family owes yours, I want to make it right." "You can't make murder right," she said quietly. "No, but I can find the truth, and I can protect you while we do." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Stella found herself studying his face, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at his temples, the tension around his mouth that spoke of a man carrying burdens he rarely shared. A noise from the doorway broke the silence. Dominic, Luca's head of security, entered with the rigid posture of someone delivering bad news. "Sir, there's movement at the storage facility. Our people report at least 4 of Blackwood's men watching the entrance." Luca cursed under his breath. "They're looking for whatever's in Unit 223. "Should we move in?" Dominic asked. Luca glanced at Stella and she saw the calculation behind his eyes, weighing risks, considering angles, always 3 steps ahead. "No," he decided. "Let them watch. We'll find another way in." After Dominic left, Stella asked, "What do you think Jamie hid there?" "Something worth killing for," Luca replied grimly. "Something that connects our families and the Blackwoods. The question is what?" A gentle chime sounded, and Luca pulled a phone from his pocket. His expression darkened as he read the message. "What is it?" Stella asked. "A perimeter alarm. Someone's approaching the east gate." Stella's heart skipped. "Blackwood's men." No, just one person, on foot. Luca stood, moving to a panel on the wall that slid aside to reveal a bank of security monitors. There. On the screen, a hooded figure approached the gate cautiously, keeping to the shadows. As they neared the camera, they looked up directly into the lens and Stella gasped. "Jamie!" Luca was already moving, barking orders into a comm unit as he strode from the room. Stella rushed after him, following through a maze of corridors until they reached what appeared to be a security center. Walls of monitors, armed men at consoles. "Bring him in," Luca ordered. "Quietly. No one outside this room knows he's here. Understood?" 10 minutes later, Jamie was escorted into the room, his hood pulled back to reveal a face thinner than Stella remembered, eyes darting nervously around the space. When he saw her, relief washed over his features. "M," he breathed, moving toward her. One of Luca's men stepped between them. "Sir?" "Let them speak," Luca said, though his posture remained vigilant. Jamie embraced her fiercely, and Stella felt the tremors running through his body. He smelled different, expensive cologne instead of the drugstore. Brands he used to wear, his clothes finer than anything he'd owned before. "Are you okay?" he whispered against her hair. "Have they hurt you?" "I'm fine," she assured him, pulling back to study his face. "Jamie, what's going on? Why did you disappear? Why does everyone think you stole money?" Jamie's eyes flicked to Luca, who stood watching them with the stillness of a predator. "Not here," Jamie murmured. "We need to talk privately." "That's not happening," Luca said flatly. "Whatever you have to say to your sister, you can say in front of me." Jamie's jaw tightened. "Like father, like son? Always need to control everything, don't you, Ricci?" Something dangerous flashed in Luca's eyes. "Careful, Carter. You're only alive because your sister would be upset if I had you shot." "Stop it, both of you," Stella snapped, stepping between them. "Jamie, just tell me what's going on, now." Jamie ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Stella's heart ache for simpler times. "I've been working undercover," he finally said, "for a federal task force investigating organized crime in Chicago." The room went utterly still. "You're a cop?" Stella whispered, disbelief coloring her voice. "Not exactly. An informant. They approached me 3 years ago after my 3rd stint in rehab, offered me a deal, work for them gathering evidence against the Ricci and Blackwood organizations, or go to prison for possession with intent to distribute." Stella felt the floor shift beneath her. 3 years? You've been lying to me for 3 years? "I had to, M." Jamie's eyes pleaded for understanding. "They were monitoring everything. My phone, my apartment. If I told you, you could have been implicated." "So what changed?" Luca asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Why run? Why involve your sister now?" Jamie's expression hardened. "Because I found something. Something about our parents' murder." He turned back to Stella. "It wasn't just a robbery, M. It was a hit, ordered by Antonio Ricci." "We know," Stella said quietly. "We found your laptop." Jamie's eyes widened. "You went to my apartment? When?" "This morning," Luca answered, "where Blackwood's men tried to kill us. Sophia took a bullet meant for your sister." Jamie paled. "Alexander was there himself?" "You know him," Luca observed, not a question. "I've been gathering intel on both families," Jamie replied. "But what I found about our parents, it changes everything. They weren't innocent victims, Em. They were involved." "Involved in what?" Stella demanded. "In whatever has kept the Ricci and Blackwood families at war for decades." Jamie pulled a flash drive from his pocket. "It's all here. The connection between our families, the real reason our parents were killed, the blackmail material Antonio Ricci and Harold Blackwood used against each other." He looked directly at Luca. "Including proof that your father ordered the hit, but not for the reasons you think." Luca's phone buzzed again. His expression went blank as he read the message. "Detective Ryan has been found murdered," he said, looking up at Jamie. "Shot execution style in his car. The ballistics will match a gun registered to one of my businesses." Jamie swore. "Blackwood, he's accelerating the timeline, trying to start a war." "Why?" Stella asked. "What does he gain?" "Both our organizations destroyed," Luca replied grimly. "The Ricci family implicated in a police officer's murder, the Blackwood organization positioned to take over our territories while we're fighting legal battles." "We need to get to the storage unit," Jamie insisted, "before Blackwood's men figure out what's inside." And what exactly is inside? Luca asked, his voice like steel. Jamie hesitated, then, insurance. Dad kept records of everything. Medical records, financial transactions, meetings. He didn't trust anyone, not Antonio Ricci, not Harold Blackwood. When he realized how deep he'd gotten, he created a failsafe. What kind of medical records? Stella asked, remembering what Luca had said about their grandfather. Brain scans, Jamie replied, of Antonio Ricci, showing a tumor that was affecting his behavior, making him paranoid, violent. Dad was treating him secretly, against the family's wishes. The tumor's location, it explains a lot about Antonio's actions in his final years. Luca went very still. You're saying my father was ill? That his actions weren't his own? I'm saying it's complicated, Jamie replied. More complicated than a simple revenge story. Your father killed our parents, yes. But the reason why... He shook his head. You need to see the evidence for yourself. Stella watched Luca's face, saw the conflicting emotions warring beneath his controlled expression. This was a man who had built his life on his father's legacy, a legacy now called into question. Get the cars ready, Luca finally said to Dominic. We leave in 10 minutes. As the room emptied, Luca turned to Stella. You should stay here. It's safer. No, she stood straighter, finding certainty in the chaos. These are my parents. This is my brother. This is my life now, whether I wanted it or not. I'm coming with you. Something like admiration flickered in Luca's eyes. As you wish. He moved closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. But stay close to me. Whatever happens tonight, whatever we learn, I will protect you, Stella. That's a promise. Their eyes held, and in that moment, Stella realized the terrible truth that had been building since that first night at her door. Despite everything, despite the blood between their families, she was falling for him. For his strength, his loyalty, the glimpses of honor beneath the darkness, and from the way he looked at her, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. She knew he felt it too. Behind them, Jamie watched their silent exchange, his expression unreadable. Whatever revelations awaited them at the storage unit, whatever truths about their shared past, one thing was certain: by morning, nothing would be the same. The storage facility loomed before them like a fortress of corrugated metal, floodlights casting harsh shadows across the parking lot. Stella sat in the back of Luca's SUV, sandwiched between her brother and Dominic, while Luca and 2 other men occupied the vehicle ahead of them. The plan was simple: create a diversion at the main entrance, while Jamie led a smaller team through the maintenance access in the rear. They're watching the front gate, Dominic murmured into his comm unit. 2 men in a black sedan, another near the office. Jamie fidgeted beside Stella, the flash drive clutched in his hand like a talisman. This is a mistake, he whispered. Too many variables, too exposed. Stella studied her brother in the dim light. The Jamie she knew had always been impulsive, reckless. This calculating stranger beside her was someone else entirely, someone shaped by years of deception and fear. We're committed now, she replied. And I need answers, Jamie. About Mom and Dad, about what's on that flash drive, about why you've been lying to me for 3 years. Guilt flashed across his features. I was protecting you. By keeping me in the dark? By letting me think you were still struggling with addiction? Anger surged through her. I mourned you, Jamie. When you disappeared for weeks at a time, I thought you were dead in some alley with a needle in your arm. That's on me, he admitted, eyes downcast. But after tonight, you'll understand why it had to be this way. Dominic's phone buzzed. We're a go. Ricci's people are creating a distraction at the main entrance. They exited the SUV, moving silently through the shadows toward a rusted door at the back of the facility. Jamie produced a key card, swiping it through an ancient reader that beeped softly before the lock clicked open. Where did you get that? Stella whispered. Made friends with the night manager, Jamie replied, a flash of his old charm breaking through the tension. You'd be amazed what people will tell you over a few beers. The maintenance corridor smelled of mildew and disinfectant, dim emergency lighting casting everything in sickly green. Jamie led them through the maze with the confidence of someone who'd mapped every turn, finally stopping before a door marked Utility Access. Unit 223 backs up to this maintenance room, he explained, pulling tools from his pocket. The facility added these walls later. They're just drywall over the original storage units. Stella watched in disbelief as her brother, her rule-following, once straight-A student brother, expertly cut through the wall, creating an opening just large enough to crawl through. "Federal task force teach you that?" she asked. Jamie's smile was humorless. "Among other things. One by one, they squeezed through the hole into the storage unit. Dominic went first, weapon drawn, followed by Jamie, then Stella. The space was larger than she'd expected, filled with sealed plastic containers stacked floor to ceiling. A layer of dust covered everything, undisturbed for years. Jamie moved directly to a container in the back corner, opening it to reveal dozens of medical files, external hard drives, and journals bound with rubber bands. "Here," he said, pulling out a stack of brain scans labeled AR, Antonio Ricci. Stella examined them with her medical training. "Frontal lobe tumor," she murmured, pressing on the amygdala and prefrontal cortex. This would affect impulse control, decision-making, emotional regulation. Dad was treating him secretly, Jamie confirmed. Antonio Ricci was paranoid, increasingly violent. Dad believed the tumor was causing it, but the Ricci family couldn't risk anyone knowing their leader was compromised. "So why kill him?" Stella asked. "If Dad was helping?" Jamie pulled out a journal. "Because Dad threatened to go public when Antonio ordered a hit on Harold Blackwood's son. He told Antonio the tumor didn't excuse murder." He flipped through pages of their father's meticulous notes. But there was more to it. Dad found something in those brain scans, evidence that Antonio had been poisoned, slowly, deliberately, with a substance that promoted tumor growth. Stella's blood chilled. Who would poison him? That's where it gets complicated. Jamie reached deeper into the container, retrieving a sealed envelope. This is what the Blackwoods have been searching for. Proof that Harold Blackwood was poisoning Antonio Ricci while using our father as an unwitting accomplice. The maintenance door burst open before Jamie could continue. Luca entered, his expression tight with urgency. "We need to move," he said. "Blackwood's men breached the main entrance. They took out 2 of my people." Jamie shoved the envelope and brain scans into a backpack. "Take this," he said, thrusting it at Stella. "No matter what happens, get this to the Federal Task Force. Contact Agent Weller." He pressed a business card into her palm. "Jamie, I'll meet you at the exit." He cut her off, turning to another container. Stella felt Luca's hand close around her arm, gentle but insistent as he guided her toward the hole in the wall. "Now, Stella." She crawled through, heart racing, followed by Luca. Behind them, she heard Jamie call, "Wait!" But it was too late. They were already moving down the corridor, Dominic ahead checking each turn. They burst through the rear exit into the cool night air, just as gunfire erupted from the front of the facility. Luca pushed Stella toward the waiting SUV, his body shielding hers, while Dominic laid down covering fire toward shapes moving in the darkness. "Where's Jamie?" Stella gasped as Luca practically threw her into the vehicle. "Right behind us," Luca replied, though his eyes told a different story as he scanned the exit they'd just used. The SUV peeled away from the curb, tires squealing as Dominic executed a perfect tactical departure. Through the rear window, Stella watched the storage facility recede, emergency lights now flashing in the distance. Of Jamie, there was no sign. "We have to go back," she insisted, clutching the backpack to her chest. "He made his choice," Luca said, his voice hard but not unkind. "Jamie knows how to take care of himself. Right now, our priority is getting that evidence somewhere safe." The drive back to the estate passed in tense silence. Stella's phone buzzed once. A text from an unknown number. "Got out another way. Don't trust anyone. We'll contact soon." Relief washed through her, followed immediately by suspicion. If Jamie had escaped, why hadn't he joined them? What else was he keeping from her? The estate was in full security lockdown when they arrived, guards positioned at every entrance, dogs patrolling the perimeter. Marco met them in the foyer, his usual composure fractured by obvious tension. "Alexander Blackwood called," he reported. "He's requesting a meeting tomorrow night." Luca's expression darkened. "On what terms?" "Neutral ground, the old Huntington Hotel downtown. He says he wants to discuss a truce." Stella clutched the backpack tighter. "It's a trap. He wants what we found tonight." Obviously, Luca agreed, but refusing would show weakness. We'll meet him, but on our terms. Later, in the privacy of Luca's study, Stella spread the contents of Jamie's backpack across the antique desk. Brain scans, journal entries, financial records, pieces of a puzzle that had shaped both their lives without their knowledge. My father was being poisoned, Luca said quietly, examining the medical reports, by Harold Blackwood, and your father discovered it. Which is why your father had mine killed, Stella concluded, to silence him. But why wait years to investigate? Luca asked. Why is this all coming to a head now? Stella held up a document from the envelope Jamie had emphasized, a death certificate for Michael Blackwood, Alexander's younger brother, dated 22 years ago. The cause of death, gunshot wound to the chest. The same night my parents were killed, she whispered. Understanding dawned in Luca's eyes. My father killed your parents the same night Alexander's brother died. They're connected. Before they could discuss further, Stella's phone rang. An unknown number. She answered on speaker. Stella, it's Kelly. Stella frowned. She hadn't spoken to her friend from the hospital in days. Kelly? How did you get this number? Your brother gave it to me. Listen, I'm at Chicago Memorial. Jamie's here. He's been shot. It's bad, Stella. He's asking for you. Ice flooded Stella's veins. How bad? They're taking him to surgery now. He made me promise to call you first, said it was life or death. Kelly's voice cracked. Please, Em, I know things are weird right now, but he needs you. Stella looked at Luca, who was already shaking. His head. It could be a trap, he said after Kelly had hung up. Or my brother could be dying, Stella countered. I can't ignore this, Luca. I'm a nurse. I took an oath to help people, starting with my own family. Then I'm coming with you. You can't. The hospital will be crawling with cops if Jamie's really been shot. You'll be arrested on sight. Luca's jaw tightened. I'm not letting you walk into potential danger alone. Then send Sophia, Stella suggested. She can pose as a visitor. Once I confirm Jamie's actually there, you can bring in more men if needed. Luca paced the length of the study, the conflict evident in every line of his body. Finally, he stopped before her. 2 hours, he said. You check on Jamie and you come straight back. Sophia will be with you every step. If anything seems wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately. Stella nodded, relief washing through her. Thank you. His hand rose, hovering near her cheek before dropping back to his side, the gesture aborted by his own restraint. Be careful, Stella. I've lost too much already to lose you too. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Before Stella could respond, Sophia appeared in the doorway, pale but determined, her arm in a sling. Car's ready, she announced. Let's go find your brother. Chicago Memorial was exactly as Stella had left it. Fluorescent lights, antiseptic smell, the controlled chaos of a busy urban hospital. Her scrubs were still in her locker, and she changed quickly, the familiar routine calming her frayed nerves. In medical blue, she could move through the hospital unchallenged, while Sophia waited in the visitor's lounge, her weapon concealed beneath her jacket. Stella approached the surgical floor's nurse's station, heart pounding. I'm looking for a Jamie Carter, gunshot wound, admitted tonight. The charge nurse, Diane, who'd worked with Stella for years, frowned. Jamie Carter? No GSWs admitted tonight, honey. Are you sure you have the right hospital? Confusion washed through Stella, followed by creeping dread. My friend Kelly called. She said he was here. Kelly hasn't worked since Wednesday, Diane replied. She called in sick, something about a family emergency. The trap snapped shut with audible clarity. Stella reached for her phone just as a hand closed around her arm. She turned to find Kelly standing beside her, a sad smile on her familiar face. I'm sorry, Em, she said softly, but Alexander Blackwood wants to talk to you. Now. Stella felt something press against her side, the unmistakable shape of a gun beneath Kelly's coat. You're working for Blackwood? Since when? Since always, sweetie. Kelly's smile never reached her eyes. 5 years watching you, reporting on your life, your schedule, making sure you stayed right where we needed you when the time came. Why? Stella whispered, betrayal burning like acid. Because your brother wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Kelly guided her toward the service elevator. Now we're going to walk out of here, nice and calm. Your little bodyguard is already being taken care of. Stella's heart dropped. If you've hurt Sophia, that depends entirely on how cooperative you decide to be. Outside, a black car waited at the service entrance. As Kelly pushed her toward it, the rear door opened. A man stepped out, tall, immaculately dressed with shock-white blonde hair and eyes like Arctic ice. Alexander Blackwood smiled, extending his hand as if greeting an old friend. "Ms. Carter, I've been waiting 22 years to meet you. Please, get in. We have so much to discuss." Stella glanced back at the hospital, searching desperately for Sophia, for help, for any escape. Finding none, she entered the car, the door closing behind her with terrible finality. Alexander settled beside her, his cologne expensive and subtle. "You have something that belongs to me," he said pleasantly. "I believe your brother gave it to you tonight." "I don't know what you're talking about," Stella replied, voice steadier than she felt. "The evidence from storage unit 223, the proof of what really happened the night our families were torn apart." His smile tightened. "The truth about who killed my little brother." As the car pulled away from the hospital, Stella realized with sickening clarity that she was being driven straight into the heart of a decades-old blood feud, and the only man who might save her had no idea where she'd gone. The Blackwood estate sprawled across the north shore of Lake Michigan, a modernist monument of glass and steel that reflected the water like a mirror. Unlike Luca's traditional mansion, with its old-world elegance, Alexander's home was aggressively contemporary, all sharp angles and cold surfaces that matched its owner's personality perfectly. Stella sat in what Alexander called his conversation room, though its Spartan furnishings and soundproofed walls suggested less benign purposes. Her wrists were unbound, her injuries limited to the bruises Kelly's fingers had left on her arm, but the armed men stationed outside the door made her position abundantly clear. She was a prisoner, however comfortably kept. Alexander entered carrying 2 crystal glasses of amber liquid. He set one before her, taking the chair opposite. 18-year-old McCallan, he said, gesturing to the untouched drink. "I find it helps difficult conversations." "I don't want a drink," Stella replied. "I want answers." "As do I." He studied her face, his pale eyes unnervingly focused. "You look like your mother." She had the same determination in her eyes, even at the end. Stella's hands clenched in her lap. "You were there? The night they died?" "I was." No pretense, no evasion, just cold acknowledgement that froze Stella's blood. "Though not by choice. I was supposed to be meeting Michael, my brother, at your parents' house. We were all friends once upon a time. Your father treated our father just as he treated Antonio Ricci. 3 families, bound by medicine and secrets. And now 2 of those families are trying to destroy each other," Stella said. "Why? What happened that night?" Alexander took a measured sip of his whiskey. "War happened. Antonio Ricci happened." He set down his glass with precision. "Your father discovered Antonio was being poisoned and confronted my father about it. Harold denied everything, of course, but your father had proof, the same proof your brother has been collecting." "The brain scans," Stella said, "and the blood work showing elevated levels of thallium, a poison that over time affects the brain, creates paranoia, aggression, impaired judgment." Alexander's expression hardened. "Antonio discovered what my father had done and ordered the hit on your parents, thinking they were complicit. Michael was with your parents when Ricci's men arrived. Wrong place, wrong time. So my parents died because of your father's actions." "They died because of all of us," Alexander corrected. "My father poisoning Antonio, Antonio's paranoid retaliation, your parents' naive belief they could navigate the space between 2 crime families without consequences." He leaned forward. "But what matters now is ending this once and for all. By killing Luca, by framing him for Detective Ryan's murder." Alexander's smile was cold. "By eliminating the Ricci family entirely, retribution for Michael's death, for 22 years of waiting and planning." A commotion outside drew their attention, raised voices, the sound of scuffling. The door burst open, and Kelly pushed a bloodied Sophia into the room, a gun pressed to the younger woman's temple. "Look who we found trying to breach the perimeter," Kelly announced, shoving Sophia to her knees. Sophia's gunshot wound had reopened, blood seeping through her shirt, but her eyes burned with defiance as they met Stella's. "Don't tell them anything," she gasped. "Luca knows, Kelly's pistol cracked against Sophia's skull, cutting off her words. Stella lurched forward instinctively, her nurse's training overriding caution. "Stop it!" she demanded. "She needs medical attention." "She'll get it when you give me what I want," Alexander replied calmly. "The evidence from Unit 223, your brother's flash drive, all of it." Stella looked from Sophia's bleeding form to Alexander's impassive face, calculating her options. If Sophia was here, it meant Luca knew she'd been taken. But how long before he found them? How much more damage could Alexander do in the meantime? "I don't have it," she said truthfully. "It's at Luca's estate." "Then call him." Alexander pushed a phone toward her. "Tell him to bring everything, all the evidence, all the files, or his sister dies slowly while you watch." Stella's fingers trembled as she dialed the number she'd memorized without realizing. Luca answered on the first ring. "Stella?" His voice, normally so controlled, held an edge of barely restrained panic. "I'm with Alexander Blackwood," she said, keeping her voice steady. "He has Sophia. She's hurt." "Are you harmed?" The question carried more weight than its simple words. "No, but he wants the files from Unit 223, all of them." A beat of silence. Then, "Put Blackwood on the phone." Alexander took the device, his expression never changing as he listened to whatever Luca said. "1 hour, he finally replied. "Come alone. Any sign of your men, any police, and both women die?" He ended the call, turning back to Stella. "It seems your Mafia prince is willing to trade his family's secrets for his sister, and for you." "He'll kill you," Sophia spat, blood trickling from her split lip. Alexander's smile never reached his eyes. "Many have tried, Ms. Ricci. Yet here I stand." The longest hour of Stella's life crawled by, marked only by Sophia's labored breathing and Alexander's unnerving stillness. When the security system finally announced a vehicle approaching, Stella felt her heart lurch painfully against her ribs. Kelly dragged Sophia to her feet, using her as a human shield as Alexander led them to the main foyer. Through the massive glass entry, Stella watched Luca's car stop at the front steps. He emerged alone, carrying a leather briefcase, his dark eyes scanning the house's facade until they found her face through the glass. Even at a distance, she felt the connection between them, a tether of something deeper than circumstance or attraction, something that had grown in the crucible of shared danger and revealed truths. Alexander opened the door himself, standing aside as Luca entered. "The briefcase on the table," he instructed. "Slowly." Luca complied, his movements measured, controlled, but his eyes never left Stella's, communicating something she couldn't quite decipher. "It's all there," he said. "Everything from Unit 223, everything Jamie Carter collected. Now release them." Alexander approached the briefcase, opening it to examine the contents. "Your father killed my brother," he said without looking up. "And your father poisoned mine," Luca replied evenly. "We've both lost, Blackwood. Isn't 22 years of blood enough?" "Not nearly." Alexander removed a USB drive from the case. "You know what's on this? Video evidence of Antonio Ricci murdering Michael, taken by Stella's father the night they all died." He inserted the drive into a laptop on the entry table. "I've waited decades to confirm what I've always known." The video began playing, security footage from what Stella recognized as her childhood home. The timestamp showed 11:42 p.m. September 22 years ago. The grainy black and white image showed her father's study, her mother pacing anxiously while a young man, Michael Blackwood, spoke animatedly. Then the door burst open and Antonio Ricci entered, gun raised. What happened next unfolded with sickening clarity. Michael lunging forward, not to attack Antonio but to shield Stella's mother. Antonio firing, Michael falling. Then Stella's father rushing in, Antonio turning the gun on him, her mother screaming. Stella turned away, unable to watch her parents' final moments. When she looked back, the video had frozen on Antonio's face, contorted with rage, eyes wild with something beyond anger, something broken. "The tumor," Stella whispered. "You can see it affecting him." Alexander closed the laptop. "Illness doesn't excuse murder." "No," Luca agreed, his voice strained. "It doesn't. My father was a monster, with or without the tumor, just as yours was for poisoning him. The difference is, my father won." Alexander smiled thinly. "And after tonight, I'll finish what he started." "I don't think so." Luca's voice changed, hardening with certainty. Now, Stella. Stella moved without thinking, driven by the absolute trust in Luca's command. She dropped to the floor just as the windows exploded inward, tactical teams swarming through the shattered glass. Kelly's grip on Sophia loosened in shock, and Sophia drove her elbow backward with practiced precision, breaking Kelly's nose with a sickening crunch. Chaos erupted. Shouts, flashbang grenades, the controlled violence of a federal raid. Stella crawled toward Sophia, pulling her down behind a sofa as bullets flew overhead. Through the confusion, she saw Alexander reaching for a weapon, saw Luca moving toward him with single-minded purpose. "Federal agents! Weapons down!" A voice boomed through a megaphone, but Alexander was already firing, a shot grazing Luca's shoulder before he tackled the white-haired man to the marble floor. They grappled, each seeking lethal advantage, until a single gunshot froze the room. Alexander Blackwood stared up at Luca, genuine surprise crossing his features as crimson bloomed across his immaculate white shirt. Behind him stood Jamie, his face grim, service weapon still raised. "For our parents," Jamie said quietly, "and for Michael." Federal agents swarmed forward, securing Alexander as medical personnel rushed in. Stella moved on autopilot, her training taking over as she pressed a cloth against Sophia's reopened wound, barking orders to the paramedics as they approached. Through the commotion, her eyes found Luca's. Blood soaked his sleeve where Alexander's bullet had torn through muscle, but he stood tall, watching her with an expression that made her heart contract painfully in her chest. Then agents surrounded him, and he was gone, led away in handcuffs alongside the surviving members of both organizations. 18 months later, Stella pulled her car into the parking lot of the community clinic she now ran in one of Chicago's most underserved neighborhoods. The modest building bore the newly installed sign, Carter Ricci Memorial Clinic, funded entirely by the Ricci Foundation, the legitimate business interests Luca had transferred to Stella's control before his sentencing. Sophia waited by the entrance, her leather jacket concealing the scars from surgeries that had saved her life. She'd appointed herself head of security for the clinic, channeling her skills into protection rather than violence. "Busy day?" she asked as Stella approached. "Always is." Stella smiled, the exhaustion a welcome change from the horrors that had brought them here. "Any word?" Sophia's expression softened. A rare occurrence still. "Jamie called from witness protection. New identity in Seattle is working out. He's teaching chemistry at a community college." Stella nodded, grateful for the updates her brother managed despite the restrictions of his protected status. His testimony against both organizations, combined with the evidence they'd collected, had brought down the remnants of the Blackwood Empire and secured reduced sentences for key members of the Ricci family, including Luca. "And," she pressed, knowing Sophia was holding something back, "and they've confirmed his release for tomorrow. Early parole for continued cooperation." Sophia's mouth quirked in a half-smile. 18 months instead of 5 years, not bad for a former crime boss. Stella's heart stuttered. Tomorrow. After 18 months of weekly prison visits, of rebuilding her life while waiting for his, of learning to navigate the strange legacy their families had left them. That night, Stella stood in her apartment, a new one, far from the memories of the old, staring at the reflection of a woman she barely recognized. Not the frightened nurse who had opened her door to find Luca Ricci claiming she was with him, but someone stronger, someone who had faced death and betrayal and emerged intact. The knock came at precisely midnight, 3 sharp raps that sent her heart into her throat. When she opened the door, 2 police officers stood in her hallway, faces impassive beneath their caps. "Ms. Carter?" the taller one asked. "Sorry to disturb you this late." "Is something wrong, officers?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. They stepped aside, revealing the man standing behind them. Luca looked different, leaner, his hair longer, shadows beneath his eyes that hadn't been there before. But when he smiled, it was the same smile that had haunted her dreams for 18 months. "She's with me," he said, the familiar words carrying new meaning as his eyes held hers. The officers nodded, one tipping his hat respectfully before they retreated down the hallway. Prison had changed many things, but not Luca's ability to command respect, even from those who once pursued him. When they were alone, Luca remained in the doorway, uncertainty flickering across features that had once been so confidently controlled. "I wasn't sure you'd wait," he admitted, voice rougher than she remembered. Stella stepped forward, closing the distance between them. I made my choice a long time ago, she said. The night you came for me at Blackwood's estate, the night you risked everything to save me. I didn't just risk everything, he said quietly. I gave it up. The organization, the power, the money, all of it, gone. Not all of it, Stella corrected, taking his hand and placing it over her heart. You still have this, if you want it. Luca's eyes darkened, and in one fluid movement he pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers with 18 months of pent-up longing. Stella melted into him, the kiss deeper and more honest than any words they could have spoken. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, Luca pressed his forehead to hers. I want to build something new, he whispered, something that honors the best parts of our families, your parents' desire to heal, my sister's loyalty, your brother's courage, something that breaks the cycle instead of continuing it. We already have, Stella replied, thinking of the clinic, of the lives they'd saved instead of taken, and we'll keep building together. Luca's smile, genuine, unguarded, transformed his face into something almost boyish. Together, he agreed, stepping fully into her apartment and closing the door behind him. Outside, the city continued its restless rhythm, unaware that a blood feud spanning generations had finally ended not in violence, but in love. And in a small apartment above the streets where it had all begun, Stella Carter and Luca Ricci wrote the first page of a new story, one entirely their own.